we're going to get started now. Panel number 3, how superior data on CTV improves transparency and brand safety. Compared with linear TV, CTV advertisers can reach the right audience for more precisely, thanks for advanced programmatic targeting. With all that data, they can go deeper than age and gender and reach companion-specific audiences in a HIPAA-compliant way. But more data means more brand safety concerns, and this next panel will share their insights into the industry and innovating with transparency and brand safety in mind. So before us, we have Matt Prohaska, CEO of Prohaska Consulting. He'll be moderating the panel. We have Lisa Kopp Johnson, SVP of Agency Development and Brand Partnerships with Integral Ad Science. We have Chris Langel, Group VP and General Manager of Global Measurements at Oracle. We have Matt McLeggon, SVP of Advanced Solutions at Magnite. And finally, Steve Mougis, Global Chief Revenue Officer at DoubleVerify. So take it away, guys.
Great to be with us, with all of you. I'm Matt with Prohaska. If you don't know us, check us out on LinkedIn, check us out online. Go say hi to Allison Vukovic, rock star from our team over there, who leads all of our engagements with a lot of our brands and agencies and buy-side tech, like our friends here at Deep Intent. We've been in business 8 years and privileged to be independent and helping all sides of the eco, sell-side, buy-side, in between. And for what it's worth, healthcare and pharma, #1 vertical all time for us. So we fortunately have had a lot of practice seeing the evolution, or in some cases lack of evolution, and kind of laggard, early adopter, classic curve in this important vertical. As we know, sometimes for appreciated legal and other reasons, folks are kind of used to being in their set ways for 70, 80 years, right? So one of the things that this great group of companies has in common, plus little old us, is that as if you know the companies pretty well, and if you don't, you will by the end of this session, we all work enterprise-wide. So we have clients around the world in all verticals. So I think a lot of the theme is going to be, ideally, what are some things that can translate from what we've been doing in other verticals into this more unique space, and then obviously some things that have worked in other media channels into, you know, the new obvious CTV adoption curve. So with that, hopefully you saw the names and titles, got some great intros here. We usually have a rule that says whoever's closest to the money gets to speak first. And so since everyone's sitting in between here beautifully, we're going to start with Lisa. So Lisa, give us a sense of IAS. And again, your raison d'etre, you and that other Lisa, CEO Lisa that we've known a long time, you know, have broadened the offerings quite a bit. And obviously CTV, I think one of the themes here is that, you know, we've followed the, you know, the big hockey stick and seen a lot of our business here as well. How has that translated into this eco for IAS? Because there are some special things unique to this space with what you guys offer, right?
Yeah, I appreciate that. And actually, I'm one of like 6 Lisas, which I think in my previous companies there were none. So I think one of the things at IAS is, like I think everyone here, right? We're here to follow the eyeballs, but also more importantly, the evolution of where the industry is, right? In terms of where marketers are not only needing trust and transparency on the buy and sell side, and we sit firmly in the middle. The acquisitions, we acquired a CTV ad server last year called Publica. So it's really about, again, focusing on building that trust and transparency between publishers, giving a lot of access to data, content signals. I heard a question previously in terms of channel and genre and the importance of that, but then also making sure that you're running in quality environments, right? Like, we know fraud is still an issue. We know that there's a lot of uncertainty as there, you know, marketers are making the shift from linear and to CTV. So we really feel that those types of acquisitions and then our core offering of focusing on media quality gives a lot of security to brands as they're navigating what is arguably still an emerging channel or a newer space.
Yep, getting there. We'll go down the line and go in order, and then we'll mix it up intentionally to keep everybody on their toes. So Chris, you know, again, if you look at the Oracle tech space, or the Oracle advertising, and the official name again is Oracle Advertising. Right, exactly, just OA, right? That's what I thought. So, I mean, we remember when we helped Grape Shot back in the day, and Eric Rosen, the whole crew, and all the assets and talent that have been accumulated here. What does that that army of Moat Plus everything mean in terms of helping, the buy side here? And again, lessons learned, maybe a couple tease outs of, well, this has worked in e-commerce and this relates or doesn't relate at all to this unique space.
For sure, yeah. Well, first thing we do is we bifurcate the audience targeting portion of the business from measurement. And so that's really important to keep that independent measurement layer.
For those that don't know, again, that's a little unique. Not everyone does that, right?
Sure,
So
yeah.
why is that important, especially as attribution and measurement is fortunately going through a massive, starting to finally go through a massive change today?
Yeah, I mean, not to sort of dive right into it, but one of the big challenges I think CTV and digital has is we still find ourselves sort of arguing over the allotted budget for digital instead of thinking about how do we really, like the previous study said, like treat TV as TV or treat it all as one budget or one sort of ecosystem. And so separating out measurement and having reach and frequency and mode analytics, which measures, traditional sort of verification as well as a little more of the attention of how long is someone spending with an ad, and then layering on Grape Shot for brand safety. Those give a holistic sort of measurement approach. What you don't want is to be in the business of saying this is a good audience to target or this is a good channel, because in some instances certain channels are more fit for purpose than others, and so having that sort of agnostic approach is really important to us.
Cool. Let's turn to the better looking man on this panel. So a little bit of sell side perspective, obviously, since that's where Mr. Barrett and your great army have assembled and kind of focused. Remember when brilliantly Tony Katzer, if folks know him, when he was at Rubicon, now Magnite, cutting off the arm of getting rid of the buy side to be able to focus and remove any doubt, right? Big sacrifice, tough at the time, but then huge. So what does that mean now that you're officially only on one side of the table, but obviously see data and inventory trends from publishers across all verticals, especially this important and growing one?
Yeah, I mean, it's been a great ride. So I came over from the SpotX side. I was 5 years in. And so Magnite, obviously, the great army, as you put it, combination of Rubicon, Telaria, SpotX, SpringServe, CTV ad server, then a couple of recent strategic acquisitions around the data aspects, nth party, Carbon. I'm sure we'll get into more into those in a moment.
So since we know Sheehan and Buckley and the whole SpotX group for a long time as well,
Great.
since I was started. So since obviously a little more personal history maybe with SpotX, so tell us, kind of what comes into the party and where pharma was as a vertical in terms of the inventory represented, because again, I'll date myself after we complete our first intros here and tell a story of linear TV and pharma with me in 1996. But video and TV, again, part of the reason for this whole session is to educate folks that maybe some dollars that are in some typical, more traditional media, let's call it outlets, are going to be maybe a little more effective and personalized in an appropriate way this way. Have you started to see that at SpotX? And maybe share a story of where other verticals have kind of made that leap already.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we're seeing it across all verticals, different speeds. I mean, CTV is television. Most of streaming television is watched on the big screen, so you're getting the, as they say, sight, sound, and motion of television, but you also have addressability, so you're able to target households, individuals, devices. So it's a very powerful marketing medium, and we're seeing a lot of spend shifting over. Obviously, brand safety was a key concern for buyers. I think there are a lot of things happening in the industry that have helped that. We see data targeting moving over to the supply side, so it's closer to the user. This is like authenticated data segments and the like. And so, we're seeing huge growth, and I think like CTV is going to be very soon bigger than linear television from an advertising perspective, which is something that would have sounded crazy to say just a few short years ago.
We've been predicting the death of the upfront almost as much as the year of mobile. We've been kind of keeping score. It was 12 years of the year of mobile? Old people remember back in the day when, this is the year, right? This will probably be the last upfront season and rhythm and separation, frankly. that we'll see for a long time. All right, so to complete things out, it's always nice when you have folks that represent great companies that have, let's say, some overlapping service offerings, where we're not going to throw chairs or anything like that. But obviously, we've got several great folks that do provide some similar services. So congrats on the promotion, right?
Thank you.
Recently, very good. So tell us about DV, and again, we know Mr. Zagorski's Empire as a fellow Western Pennsylvania, Western New York guy, always a fan of another turnaround story, like a lot of folks here are kind of, rebuilding. So what do the assets of DV mean, and kind of how do you guys go to market similar or differently in the pharma space?
To start, 96, I think I was in like 4th or 5th grade, so.
That's fine. I'll tell a story, and I can tell with the younger, good-looking people that this will go over a lot of people's heads when you're done. But go ahead. Yeah.
I've been at DV for about a decade now. I came in to run the New York ad sales team, which consisted of myself. And then I've sort of run a couple of different business units inside of the company, and obviously was just recently promoted to CRO. Like Lisa and Chris, we're a verification company, and like Matt here, we are independent and sort of sit in the middle of the ecosystem. And our focus has always been measuring and providing media quality metrics to advertisers and publishers and platforms. And we really haven't wavered from that since I've been there. It's always been the same. One of the interesting things about CTV, I don't want to actually get too much into it because I'm sure you're going to ask some curveballs.
No, get into it. That's fine.
Is this I've been doing this a long time, and I asked Chris before, I was like, when did you start at Moat? And he said 2014, so he probably remembers all this. Everything that we're going through right now from a measurement perspective is not new. It's following the same exact trends. I remember when in 2012, when we were really getting started on just viewability in general, measuring desktop, the measurement rate was like 10%, and that was good, right? And so we obviously come a long way, and it's when you look at all these new environments, it's not any different. Some nuances, some complexities, but we always end up figuring it out. So.
Yeah, so we'll get to there's a theme of kind of the early adoption curve, and one thing we've noticed the last 20 years is that with every emerging channel, the acceleration rate of things getting better and people figuring it out gets condensed, fortunately.
Exactly.
So, fraud levels, for example, in display were crazy for too long a period of time in the traditional exchange days of AppNexus and all of that, semi-nonsense. CTV fraud, sure, there's a little bit. You guys probably aren't impacted as much because of the quality publishers are working with these guys. But it's getting condensed. There's still some of the criminals are trying to play the same game, but it's much different in this space. So all right, so here's the quick story. So it's February of 1996. How many of you were out of college in February of 1996? Ross, he's old, of course. Thank you. Good to know. Yeah, all right. The lighting is helping. You guys look really young and good there. So I'm at BBDO buying linear TV and had started the digital media department in the fall of '94 after this first little browser thing came out from this company, Netscape. And I left BBDO to go to this company, CNET, to start their sales team back in the day and sell these crazy things called banners. And the worldwide media director said, I'm 24 at the time. And he's like, why would you want to leave? The example I gave all the time was, and this will date myself, I was tired of watching World News Tonight with the late, great Peter Jennings. Anybody remember? Ross, of course, does, yeah. I was tired of watching World News Tonight and seeing menopause ads in every pod. I'm not in the demo. My mom at the time was not on the demo. We got to do better than that. So it's funny seeing the stats that AJ and you guys shared earlier and how, again, we're getting better, but still, the number of linear shows, like your question about differences in television. I mean, I think in terms of CTV and lean forward versus background news. I mean, unless sadly we're all obviously paying a little more attention in Ukraine and elsewhere, but news and other areas, unscripted sometimes is a little more background. Scripted, CTV, you're a little more lean in, right? So that's one of the differences we've seen in terms of why, attention and some of the performance metrics are a little bit better there for what it's worth. So help us out in terms of, where, we hate to be in a great conference by deep intent talking about the pharma space and ripping laggards and all this other stuff, but pharma is classically one of those that understandably culturally, it's been slower to go, and everyone has the list of HIPAA don'ts tattooed or in their virtual or literal cubes here. So give us, if anybody can jump in, toss up, any successes or kind of early signs that you've seen where, actually we're making leaps and kind of catching up to where other verticals have been that are so-called more performance oriented.
Yeah, I mean, I think we have a reason for optimism and also a collective frustration, because while I think we're getting better at not repeating the same mistakes, fraud, I do think some of the things are increasingly sophisticated. So I know collectively we've all had uncovered some different fraud. The one that we found, folks were masking server-side ad insertion to the extent of 28 million households. Like, that's not a small problem.
Yep.
But we found it quickly, and I think in other sort of iterations it's taken a while. But I actually think of it as really optimistic, because I think this is the first time people have moved already. We're not predicting the age of mobile. We're not
That's right.
predicting. People have already moved, so
The eyeballs are there.
Right.
The classic stereotype of advertisers following, the reason why it was 12 years of mobile is because everyone, like the gap between real behavior and ad spend
Right.
was still too wide for a decade, right?
100%.
Like that gap is closed in CTV in pretty much every vertical, right?
Right. I mean, if you buy a TV, you go home, you literally can't turn it on without connecting it to the internet. So it's not, how do we figure this out? It's there. And so I think there's a collective will to not have all these underlying problems we've had before, brand safety, fraud. And so I think it'll move much faster. Even though all those frustrations, I think, still hold advertisers back. Like, they don't want to end up serving to a masked, domain, and that confidence isn't quite there yet, I think.
I think you said it before, and you're totally right. It's the time from which people start getting in and starting to measure to when they have everything that they need to make an advertiser feel truly comfortable running there. It condenses every time we hit a new environment. What we're doing right now in CTV, it's the same exact thing that we went through in mobile apps. And it's nuanced, right? There are differences in the way that the ads are served, and some are client-side, some are server-side, but the playbook is there. So we know what needs to happen. It's just a matter of getting the people behind it and getting the momentum and consolidating the timeline, but we'll absolutely get there.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, I'll say, sorry.
Well, I was just going to comment. I mean, I'm here for IAS, but I also think it's worth noting that the technology in terms of how you buy has improved so much over the past couple of years, right? So when you look at platforms like the Trade Desk, to be able to move some of those buy over, there's upside in terms of optimizations, reach and frequency. And so I think, yes, all the measurement is obviously evolving, but also how you buy and the benefits when you do a consolidated approach from linear is also driving a ton of value for advertisers. And so when we think about that shift, it's also what's the ROI on that shift, what kind of insights and data are you getting back, because the sophistication of the buying platforms has evolved so much too.
I think consolidation and understanding the supply path is key. I think as a programmatic platform, the perception of programmatic that exists in the industry kind of lags behind where we are, particularly where we are today in CTV.
Yes.
There's not 10 ways from a technology standpoint to get to discovery content. There's 2, right? And so understanding the supply path and going through trusted technologies that have direct relationships with the publishers is key. If you're getting $5 Disney inventory, you're probably not.
Yeah.
Yeah. Perfect segue, because Matt, I wanted to ask you about the direct relationship between buyer and seller and what you saw at SpotX and what we've seen with pre-roll video and now CTV, and again, a lot of the folks, and this is coming from someone again who knows and worked with a lot of great linear TV and radio folks 27 years ago. A lot of them still doing it. Nothing against them, but some have adapted, and some are, like, we literally had one guy I worked with 28 years ago who then became head of a cable sales channel 5 years ago say to us, do I really need to learn all this? I'm trying to retire in 3 years. And we're like, well, you can learn on your own and be a hero and lead folks out and your legacy is set. You can maybe sneak out just in time and be forgotten as a Luddite, or you could retire early. And that person retired early, literally selling sneakers at a Dick's Sporting Goods now, unfortunately. So for folks that, again, we're not wanting to have fear, we're wanting to show optimism here and show, we've been trying to get rid of the word programmatic, frankly, after becoming the largest programmatic consulting practice, because the terms have been bastardized by everyone. Because if you're not involved, you think it's just open auction garbage, tag and bag, trick the ad server to steal credit from what all the other great publishers are doing. Help these guys just validate, again, in video and how the relationship between buyer and seller has been a little stronger there, right?
Yeah, I mean, this touches on my point earlier about the perception of programmatic versus reality. In CTV, it's a deal-driven world. So there is... The open marketplace doesn't see most of the inventory. So these are deals. These are PMPs that are happening directly between buyer and seller, just with the automation and transparency of programmatic. So it's automated. I think the right term is automation, right? So
yeah. As we say all the time, if you could buy and sell the same ad faster with more data, make it better personalized, higher CPM for the seller, better ROAS for the buyer, why wouldn't you do that all day, right? Is CTV still kind of separated out, if you will, in the Magnite empire, or is it kind of all in one bucket? Because I'm curious about some trends in CTV specifically, and for those here who haven't maybe been as all in as the audiences are.
It's a good question. I mean, we're going through a platform and technology consolidation right now, and so as an omnichannel
A few pieces
company,
to put together. Yeah, that's fair.
Several pieces.
All right, so just keep making SpotX then, if that's easy. If you can still talk about that.
I think the whole story is interesting. I think we're putting the tools in place for when we reach a point where buyers are all of display and online video and CTV and linear TV are all sitting in the same room. I don't think we're there yet. What we're focused on is, rather than creating a platform for singular execution across all these environments, is really focusing on, can you have a unified experience from like a planning, execution, reporting, measurement perspective. That's kind of where we are today. I think we're a few years away from the place where the linear TV buyers and the display buyers are in the same room.
Hopefully that day will come, and not just because the pandemic is waning. But culturally, we've been... The role of the generalist is desperately needed even more, and someone who just knows everything instead of this is my lane, and I'm incentivized to move as much money into my lane as possible, right? A question for the three of you guys. I want to ask about whitelists and blocklists, and kind of what that looks like, behind the scenes, without naming names and specific URLs or anything like that. But I mean, pharma typically and understandably would be a little more sensitive than, say, broader entertainment or others that have a little more liberal use. Is that true and valid? And same thing in CTV, right? It's not like there's something more unique there, but because there are fewer publishers in general, as opposed to slap up a website, it's a little easier to control here, right? So the fear should be less in general, right?
I think there is a little bit of fear, but like I was saying earlier, it's no different than any of the other environments. It just takes a little bit of time to get to the full level of capability that you have there. With any environment, including CTV, it always starts with inclusion and exclusion. Like, that's typically when you get to a new environment, that's the first thing that verification companies can figure out. You normalize all the bundle IDs, you figure it out. CTV is a little bit more complicated than mobile, because with mobile it's 2 app stores, and so it's a bundle ID that you look at twice, and it's easy to normalize everything. In CTV, it's one publisher, and then there's a bunch of different app stores. So normalizing the bundle ID can be a little bit complicated. But once you figure that out, inclusion and exclusion is then possible. And then once you get a little bit better, you build up your capability, you can start to understand the content behind the individual apps, and that's when things get a little bit more interesting, and the control enters the thing. So you can do exclusion, which is giving you some, and transparency, which is great. But then once you start layering on content, that's when you can really fine tune where you're running. And that's when people start to get a lot more confidence in running in programmatic, especially for CTV.
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree. I think that plus one to Steve, but I also think that there's still so much education that needs to happen, particularly in the pharma landscape, right? Like we still know that most pharma advertisers are over-indexing on linear, right? Like they're comfortable with it, there's mass reach, CPMs. And so I think that, exactly as Steve said, though, there's a lot of education that needs to happen in terms of the protections that can be put in place, the quality of the inventory, and again, the additional measurement and added benefits that connected television gives you, right? The data and insights is just arguably more robust. And so I think there's an education piece that still needs to happen, in addition to everything that I agree with on the inclusion and exclusion, right? Like we're all verification, but I think that a lot of pharma marketers are just comfortable in what they're doing, said with respect, and it's been a safe place. It hasn't evolved for 50 years. So in the last 3 years, things have changed so much. So it's our job to go educate the market on all the additional benefits that connected television gives.
Yeah,
We're like tech nerds, obviously. Like, if you take a step back and look at the opportunity is great, right? Like,
Yeah, it's massive.
CTV advertising is unbelievable, and doing it programmatically when you can bring your data to the game, it's a really unbelievable opportunity. I think people should feel comfortable in the fact that there is transparency now, there is measurement, there are blocking and filtering capabilities that allow you to exclude certain types of content. So I think we're more or less there. Certainly, there's the fraud is detectable and sort of can be easy to eliminate, but they certainly won't stop trying, especially when the prize is so high in CTV. But people should feel safe and comfortable. We've all been at this for a really long time.
Right, but the good news is, as Matt knows, I mean, if every marketer and their agency partner did direct deals,
Yeah.
programmatically or IO, PG or PMP, with individual publishers, fraud goes to zero, right? Because everybody knows who everyone is. The reason there's no fraud in linear TV, because we all bought, ABC, and it's not like folks could get into the pipes of MVPDs and all that. If the gatekeepers that we know you guys are one of the leaders in making sure that it's policing, then again, we can, have our services evolve to do other things, all right, to help out instead of playing whack-a-mole on a lot of stuff. Give us a sense, I want to ask about walled gardens and CTV and what that means and doesn't mean for these guys differently here. 3 years ago, I spent an hour pitching the CTO of DataZoo, who became the head of product at Roku, to not be a walled garden. And I was temporarily unsuccessful, despite their new front presentation Tuesday. That might make you think otherwise. How much of the walled garden ecosystem in CTV, where there's one narrative and a hypothesis that says we're going to have 500 walled gardens, and marketers are just going to have to go one at a time. Nice in that maybe open auction doesn't need to exist as much anymore, but tough to move data, especially in this vertical, where if it's done properly and legally, I'm wanting to let folks know my conditions, what I'm looking for, right? I'd rather have stuff I care about pushed out more. There's one ad that we use all the time showing the evil geniuses at Apple and what they've been doing. Do you guys remember fall of 2019, they started running these linear 30s during the World Series when they were first touting their privacy. And they showed a single woman alone running on a treadmill, dark lighting, ominous music, and it was, do you want your health data being shared? With anyone else. I'm like, yeah, my effing doctor. What are you kidding? And the APIs are still a disaster. I have dating myself as old as Ross. I have cataracts now. Youngest person I've ever met. The nightmare of and we all have this probably with parents or ourselves, the nightmare of getting data in and out of places that genuinely would help us stay alive and lead better lives is painful. Translating that to marketing, it seems like getting data in and out of these publishers so that you can know what has worked and what hasn't, to then apply, again, just to make it better for the consumer and or the doctor, if you're marketing that way, seems like it's more needed. What have you guys noticed in terms of the walled garden ecosystem and pros and cons and benefits there as it relates to your business?
Yeah, I mean, personally, I think what you hit on is a big focus for Oracle more broadly. And I think I think our head of product would probably say he agrees that the world is headed towards everyone sort of their own walled garden, especially with...
It's tough when Wall Street has applauded the 4 largest walled gardens.
Yeah,
More dollars have gone semi-inappropriately to them for 15 years, right?
And the deprecation of the cookie and data management and privacy, right? So where I think we sort of miss as an industry is where we were talking about education and storytelling before. Like, someone can correct me if I have the numbers wrong, but I don't know what it is in pharma, but our global clients more broadly spend about 30 to 35% of their budgets in digital. And there's no way anyone in this room would believe that only 35% of the time spent of the consumers is in digital. So like, what's holding us back? And so I do think that the collective sort of ecosystem needs to embrace things like measurement. Like, the great news, is there's now 3 publicly traded companies with resources to figure out what the fraudsters are doing next, to figure out how to have measurement better. It's actually, CTV is quite a bit easier than mobile, like on the tech side.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of good things, but I think, there's still some folks that are hesitant to be measured. They're like, well, no, CTV is 100% viewable. Maybe it is, maybe it's not. Like, how do we jump past those problems? And I think if the whole industry would embrace a little more of education and measurement, it would be 60% of budgets pretty quickly.
Yeah, I think as you both described, I mean, no one's ever really agreed on the definition of a walled garden. I think of a walled garden as there's one technology path to serve ads there. I think what we have, and I didn't make this up, we have hedged gardens in the industry. So we serve ads everywhere. We serve ads into Hulu and Roku and Disney. What you do see, though, are differences in terms of what data can be activated and how it can be measured, as you've said. And so, we've invested heavily in this area. We bought the company called Nth Party. I don't want to use the word clean room because that's kind of an industry buzzword. But what it comes down to is...
go ahead. That's another one that needs defining, but again, if you don't know what clean rooms are, see any of us after, and happy to help you out. Really important to be able to take stuff out, especially in this vertical. Taking stuff out, Deep Intent, I know, has a strategy there too. Yep.
At the end of the day, what it comes down to is we believe strongly that you can activate data without sharing it. The data doesn't have to move, right? So you can share the value of data and activate it without it actually moving. And so clean rooms aside, that actually also speaks to the migration of data activation to the supply side. So historically in programmatic, we'd send all the traffic to the DSPs would cherry pick impressions. What we're seeing very often today is first-party audience or first-party advertiser data sets being activated on the supply side. So we can enable data targeting, but we don't have to pass any PII or other signals outside the publisher ecosystem.
And if most human beings knew that that's how it was getting done, I mean, again, without showing them how the sausage is made too bad and wonking out, I mean, that feels safe, that feels appropriate, right?
Yep.
Okay, I know where it's going, right? Yeah. Here we got 3 minutes left, and instead of going for 4 more hours, which I know we could, wanted to toss it out in case, since we've got this very cool, intimate gathering here, if anybody's got questions for these all-stars, or anything else here. Otherwise, I've got 16 more for these guys, as they know. Yeah? All right, so let's do classic getaway question then, because with 3 minutes left, with 4 people divide by 45 seconds. So, so it's a year from now. We're asked somehow to come back next year and do the same thing. What's better? And where we are sitting here and go, thank God we don't have that garbage anymore, or now we've advanced to this. Where do we make strides around education or our services or just the whole eco and getting more into this important channel from this important vertical?
First?
Leading off, huh?
Yeah.
We'll go in the same order, yeah.
Yeah. I played softball. I was always lead off, so it fits. Well, what I'm hoping gets better is measurement, right? Like, I really do. To go back to your question, I didn't get to say it. I think we're leading to world's gardens. I hope not, right? Because there's so much value in terms of having more of a holistic approach, right? When we think about the convergence between linear and connected TV, it's going to be the new normal, but what I hope gets better is measurement, because consumers are still going to be on linear devices, marketers are still going to be on linear. We know there's a shift happening, but we need to really figure out currencies. We really need to figure out what those buy-in strategies are, and ultimately, how do we drive better ROI, especially for pharma, right? When we think about audience quality, script lift, all of that still needs to have a holistic approach so that you're driving towards the right outcomes for each of your individual brands.
Well, thanks, Chris.
Trust will be better a year from now, and I think things like reach and frequency, more sophisticated brand safety within video, those will help and break down the wall between linear and digital. CTV is perfect, place for that to happen, and so I think the trust barometer will be up a year from now, and so will budgets.
I'm gonna add to your theme of breaking down the wall between linear and digital. Last year we served programmatic ads into linear TV for the first time. So we're actually seeing the walls breaking down. So we have innovation coming from the OEMs, we have innovation coming from the MVPDs. So I think a year from now, you'll see an increase in the capabilities of digital and programmatic on actual linear television, which is cool.
Nice. Steve, take us home.
Yeah, so what I think is, I think so for CTV specifically, we've already gotten our brand safety capabilities strong where people can protect themselves based on content and different types of apps they don't want to run in. Fraud is already there. You can measure and filter out fraud on your campaigns. We have a proxy for viewability, but what I think where we'll be in a year is that viewability and attention metrics for CTV will be widespread, and it'll look a whole lot like what we're doing in mobile app space right now.
Neat. There's an analogy of, I think, CTV and the accelerated advancement and kind of a lot of leveraging lessons learned. And one of the other relevant things to this neat moment, and a lot of them, fortunately, around the world the last couple of months, is that things we know get accelerated when we do things in person like this and actually see folks and see each other's teeth for the first time in a while in real life and see, again, three-dimensional as we all joke. So special thanks to Chris and the whole Deep Intent team for the opportunity here. Thanks to you guys for listening, and please thank our panel.